was because for all the differences that we have, we come to this church seeking God. And we come to this church seeking God even more earnestly when we're going through something, when we're in need of something, either being it a trying moment or a loss or just anything in general. So whenever we have seasons of sorrow, it always brings us to God, either to the house of the Lord or to God in general. And the one thing that we do is that during our season of sorrow, our petition to God is that He get us out of it. You know, we have this constant need to always be happy. We have this constant need to always be joyful. We have this constant need to just not be sad, you know, knowing that the Lord does allow seasons of sorrow. He does allow occasions when everything isn't working well. So on the issue of someone maybe being a support in that time, I was reminded of Simon of Cyrene, and this was the man that the Roman soldiers compelled to carry the cross of Christ while he was on his way to Gethsemane. And the Bible states it as that. It said he was compelled by the Roman soldiers. He didn't volunteer to do it. He didn't step up to do it. They compelled him and told him to carry the cross of Christ for a certain distance. We don't know just how far that distance was. But the thing is that we are often compelled, and when I say compelled, not because we are forced to, but sometimes when someone is going through a hard thing, sometimes you might be led to that person, or you might see the sadness in the person's face, you might see the sorrow, and just by virtue of you being aware, you lend some sort of support to that person. And in as much as there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because I believe that everything does happen for a reason. Sometimes it's divine positioning, whatever the case may be. But when we are down, it says, woe to the person who doesn't have someone to lift them up when they are down. So someone being there at the right place at the right time, or just knowing what you're going through is always a help. But taking it back to this Simon of Cyrene, think about it. The cross of Jesus Christ was a cross that no one could bear but Him. The task that Jesus Christ was given, no other person on the face of this earth could have accomplished that task except Christ. So while Simon of Cyrene was able to bear the burden of the cross for a couple of feet or yards, no one could drink the cup of sorrow that had been apportioned to God. And we know that Christ, during that time, He begged and He pleaded with His Father. He said, Lord, if it's possible that this cup be taken from me, take it from me, but not my will, but your will be done. So the season of sorrow, the cup of sorrow wasn't something that was pleasant for Him, but He knew that He had to do it. Had He been taken out of it and been prevented from doing it, then what was achieved by virtue of it would never have been achieved. So it is always good to connect with the Lord during our season of sorrow. But the question is, are you really supposed to be brought out of it? Are you really not supposed to feel what He's asking you to feel in that time? Because if we come out of it, we might miss the message that was supposed to have been given us while we were there. We might miss the refining that was supposed to have happened to us while we were there. But again, by virtue of our anti-suffering mentality that is human nature, the minute something happens, we attribute it to witches and wizards and everything else on the face of the earth, when at the end of the day, the Lord may have allowed that thing to happen so that you can receive something while we are in it. And a perfect example of that again is the story of Job. We all know that Job's suffering did not come because the Lord was punishing him or because he was an unrighteous man. The Bible tells us he was righteous. He was upright. He did this, that, and the other. But when the enemy came and the Lord allowed him, because again, it did not happen without the Lord allowing it to happen. When it happened, think about, if you've read the story of Job, you'll know that there are 42 chapters in Job. The first 3 chapters are kind of like the preamble leading up to it. And then from 38 to 42 is kind of the conclusion. Those chapters in between were all chapters where the friends of Job were letting him have it. Letting him know, reminding him that there's no way in the world you could be going through this suffering if it wasn't because you are a sinner, or you have done this, or you have done that. And all through those chapters, 30-something chapters, all Job did was not necessarily try to vindicate himself, but think about what Job did. Job said, I know my God. I know the God that I serve. So let God use his mouth to tell me what I have done. It's not because Job sought God in that time. It wasn't because he was asking, not once did Job ask the Lord to take him out of the suffering. If anything, he wanted an understanding of why he was in that suffering. And who better yet to seek that understanding from but the one who allowed it to happen in the first place. So Job sought God throughout that time. He completely uplifted the character of God throughout that time. He never cursed him. He never put God down. But what also happened, which is really the most important part of this, because again, we don't know the span of years that happened between when Job's suffering started and when it ended. But we know that in the beginning was when he lost his family and lost all his possessions and everything. And then at the end, the Lord eventually replaced everything that he had lost, even more than he had it before. But what happened was that Job never asked God to remove it. He never asked God to get him out. He sought God. And when God now answered Job, in the end, he reminded Job, for all the knowledge of me that you really think you have, let me now give you the resume of myself. And that was when he started asking Job, do you know where the lightning is housed? Do you know where the sons of the dawn go to meet? God completely opened up himself to Job just to let Job know that whatever it is that you think you know of me, let me tell you that you don't even know the half of it. And when Job now heard what the Lord had said, his ego completely went away. He repented in sackcloth and ashes. And what he said, I had heard of you before by the hearing of the ears, but now my eyes have seen thee. A lot of times when we are going through suffering, we challenge God. You know, we call him out. We ask him again, just like Job, to explain himself. But when he does explain himself, are we repentant? Do we see the error of our ways? Do we even receive what it is that the Lord is trying to make us? The Lord was trying to tell Job that you could even transcend higher from where you are by the time I'm done with you. And Job did, because the Job that received the latter blessing was a completely different man from the Job that received the previous blessing. God did not put something new into the hands of an old Job. He put something new into the hands of a new Job. So when the Lord is allowing us to go through a trying time, he's trying to make us something better than we are. But a lot of times, we refuse to be made better. We want to stay as we are and receive new wine into old wineskins. And that is never his will. There is nothing that we go through that God does not see. Not only does he see it, he is aware of how you feel in the midst of what you are going through. He knows how you feel. He knows your suffering. He knows your pain. He knows your tears. But what he wants us to do is receive the refining during that time. The Lord can, we sing a song here that says, it's not hard, certainly with God. It's not hard for God to turn my sorrow to joy. It's not God to turn my lack into fruitfulness. We know it is not hard for him. So if he has not done it, there is a reason he hasn't done it yet. It doesn't mean he will not do it. But until he does, why not receive the refining that is going on in the season of sorrow? He is not going to give you a new blessing into an old person. He wants us to become new creations so that we can now receive this new blessing that he wants to give us. But yet we insist on staying the same. We insist on him blessing us as we are, instead of receiving the blessing that he wants to give us through this season of sorrow that we're going through. The Bible tells us not to despise the chastening of the Lord. Sorrow is not fun in any way, shape, or form that it comes. There is nothing pleasant about it. And there is nothing wrong with running to God and asking him to deliver us or to help us. But what is even better than the deliverance, the new thing he's going to give us, is us becoming new. Because the whole point of receiving Christ into our lives is so that we can become new creations. And it is not an instant abracadabra process. It is a step-by-step refining. But that refining is not going to happen unless we are willing participants in that refining. So whenever the Lord visits us or allows a season of sorrow to come upon us, let us seek him in that season of sorrow. Let us not close our eyes and grit our teeth and just stand still until it goes away. Seek God in whatever trial or tribulation that you are passing through. Seek him. And Job, who never once asked for God to replace it, because he sought God, God not only replaced everything he had, but he gave him even twice as much as he had had before. Simply because throughout the entire time, Job sought God. Whenever we're in a season of sorrow, by his grace, by the strength and power of his Spirit, may we always seek him. Seek him above everything else, above any form of relief. Because with God, with the knowledge of God, comes everything that we could ever ask for.
Yes.
In Jesus' name.